Uh, anyway, so let me share the screen and I think let us start. Okay, so we were discussing band gap. That's why basically I asked this particular question. Okay, there is sometimes I ask a question to a student, who was absent in the previous class. That why you were absent in the previous class. The answer what I get is, sir, I was absent in the previous class. I asked you the reason, right? I'm not asking the to what you say repeat the statement. Anyway, so band gap is the crucial thing for everything. A band gap will come everywhere whenever we talk of almost everything. Okay, so the point is there are two types of band gaps. One is direct and indirect. Of course, both these materials, every material will have different kind of band gap, and point is that, of course, direct as well as indirect both can be used for electronics or solar cells. So direct band gap examples are gallium arsenide and cadmium telluride. And you can see here I have this energy versus the momentum diagram. So you can see if the just a second. Yeah, if the electron has to jump from here to here, I mean, it is only along the energy axis and not along the momentum axis. So that's why only one excitation is required over here. That is only in energy has to be provided. But when you go for indirect band gap for like silicon and germanium, not only energy, you have to supply the momentum as well, because you can see the these two peaks of the valence and the conduction band, they are not along the same axis. And that's why you will find out that due to this misalignment of the minima and the maxima, the indirect band gap materials has to work more. And obviously when you have to work more to achieve the same result, obviously the efficiency is lower. In other sense, we can say that for a direct band gap the absorption probability increases, and whereas obviously for indirect the absorption probability decreases. How exactly absorption relates to a material, we will discuss it a bit later. Right now, let us concentrate on what happens over here. Now, k-axis, that is x-axis, horizontal axis is momentum, whereas the vertical axis, y-axis, is the energy. So now, when we are talking about this, we require two things. One is absorption of photon and absorption of phonon in case of indirect band gap. And the photon has got only energy and very negligible momentum, whereas the phonon, it has got low energy and high momentum, and that is related to the lattice vibrations. So the point is, the phonon absorption is required for the conservation of momentum. That has to be carried out in case of the in case of the indirect band gap. Whereas direct band gap, there is no change in momentum, so there is no question of conservation of momentum. So that's why you can see that for direct, we require only one particle, which will change the energy, which is photon. However, for indirect band gap, we require both the particles, photon as well as phonons. So what happens is both the generation as well as the recombination is what you call it as, actually it should be probable in indirect band gap semiconductors, and that's why the efficiency would be less. Okay, so as I have said, both direct as well as indirect band gaps are used for solar cells. And how it is related to the thickness, that the thicker the layer of indirect band gap, the probability of absorption of the spectrum increases. Actually, this is related to the absorption length as well, which we will discuss in detail. But just to tell you that the thickness required, let us say we want the same amount of absorption. So in that case, we can see that the direct band gap will be thinner as compared to the indirect band gap. Now, as far as solar cell is concerned, we don't optimize in that way. We try to optimize that maximum, maximum number of photons will get absorbed. And later we will see that depending upon the wavelength of the photon, the absorption length changes. So that is what the whole optimization is. So if I talk about the typical thickness of the solar cells available, it is now it is 150, even below that 200. So but it is 150 to 200, 250 microns. That is for silicon. But when we talk about the direct band gap, it is nearly 1 to 3 microns. So now you can understand we are using only 2 to 3% of the material. So that is how gallium arsenide or these direct band gap cells will use so less material compared to silicon. And to add to that, the efficiency of the direct band gap will be almost double to triple compared to the silicon. But however, now you will say that we are saving so much in here, but then with these numbers you have to realize that there is one engineering problem over here. So this is what physics tells us, okay? And what engineering says that, suppose let us say we have gallium arsenide 1 to 3 micron. That's a very thin film. How are you going to hold that solar cell? Okay, so in that case, we require a substrate. We require a supporting material for these thin films to coat on. So it may be glass. Why glass again? Because it is transparent, it is cheaper, and the point is again it is easy for deposition, because these thin films are normally deposited at 800, 900 degrees Celsius, so that glass can be suitably manufactured. So now what happens is, overall thickness of the cell would be the same, but the material thickness, active material thickness, would be less. Active material is which is taking part in any of the conversion process. So gallium arsenide are thinner cells. So the point here it becomes how thinner your substrate is. How you can also use metal, metal foils, so that you increase the thickness, and it is good for the heat conductivity as well. Anyway, so gallium arsenide, but again material cost still is higher, right? So this is how the cost of the material, deposition techniques, the thickness, everything plays a vital role in everything. So now that was all about band gap. We'll come back to that band gap when we after discussing the carriers and carrier related some terms. To start with the carrier concentration itself. So now we know the carrier, there are two types, okay? Electrons as well as hole. So as both conduct electricity, I can combinedly call them as carriers. So it doesn't matter whether it is electron or holes, unless we are very specific. So now let us say we have a purified silicon, right? So ideally, say we don't have any impurity in that. So in such a silicon is called as intrinsic silicon or intrinsic semiconductor material, which doesn't have any impurity added to it. So that the carrier concentrations which are available at a particular temperature is constant. Okay, so let us say at 0 Kelvin, you will not have any any carrier available for conduction. However, 0 Kelvin cannot be a case. So practically we will have somewhere around 273 to 300 Kelvin. So the point is, even at room temperature, you will have some electrons or some carriers available, but that's a different matter. We'll discuss it later. So as of now, let us say intrinsic carriers. So electrons and holes, these are the carriers which are taking participating in the conduction. And this number of carriers, as I've said, depends on the temperature, which I have already told you. But apart from that, obviously, it depends on the band gap of the material. Now you can imagine band gap is the distance between the conduction and the valence band. So what happens is, whenever there is a large band gap, you require more energy for electron to go from valence band to electron band. So obviously readily available electrons in the conduction band would be lesser if the band gap is more. So readily available means the thermally excited. So let us say I am keeping that material at room temperature, so 298 or 300 Kelvin. So it means there is some temperature, right? So that temperature is enough to excite the carrier thermally. So when it's a low band gap material, you will find out more thermally excited carriers because they can pass, they can jump across the band gap. However, if the band gap is large, it won't happen. So number of this carrier concentration, intrinsic carrier concentration, obviously depends on band gap as well and the temperature. Okay. So if the band gap is same, higher temperature will have a higher intrinsic concentration. If the temperature is same, the lower band gap material will have higher intrinsic concentration. So now, so either you can choose the material with a particular band gap. So if you want higher Ni, you can choose silicon over, let us say, gallium arsenide. Alternatively, you can increase the temperature as well. So whatever works is fine. But in solar cell, obviously, increasing temperature is not an option, at least deliberately. But you have to remember that temperature is a very crucial parameter for all semiconductors. Let us say your solar cell is out in the desert. Let us say even in Rourkela, the temperature can go up to 45 degrees. I'm talking about ambient temperature. Now again, you have to imagine that this cell is inside a module. So there will be a greenhouse effect. Okay, so the temperatures would be higher, 70, 80 degrees Celsius. So the temperature will have its effect. But this is good in European countries, but not good in Indian environment or near equator environment. We'll see that temperature, how it affects the efficiency much later. Anyway, so this temperature as well as band gap, both are concern or responsible for the carrier concentration. Then obviously it depends on the solar cell efficiency as well. So this concentration obviously will affect the conductivity, because if you have got more concentration, it means more number of electrons are available. So conductivity will be higher, and that's why whenever we are talking of this functioning of solar cell or any device for that matter, we should know what is the carrier concentration at any point of time. May it be intrinsic, may it be extrinsic, equilibrium concentration. Later we will have so many types of concentration. So for any device, this understanding is important, so that as I've talked yesterday, we have to optimize. For solar cell, we have to optimize certain parameters. For your rectifying diode, you have to optimize a certain parameter. This intrinsic carrier concentration Ni is the function of temperature. So typically you can remember this particular value for silicon, that is 1.5 into 10 raised to 10 per centimeter cube. So these are constants. Okay, these are, of course, as it is dependent on temperature, this value will change. So normally we take it as room temperature for calculation. So you have to remember this particular value. Then of course, as determining is difficult. I mean, every time you cannot go and measure it. So there are certain empirical formulas which are given, but this is just for your information. And as I've said, it depends on where you are measuring the concentration as well, and what temperatures. So roughly 1 to 1.5 into 10 raised to 10, depending upon small variation in temperature. So you can find out these data at many places, and it might change because it depends on the measurement. Okay, so that's why there is no standard as such, but roughly you can tell. Anyway, but as far as this intrinsic semiconductors are concerned, they are actually of no use for us for using it in solar cell. Why? Because obviously we have to impart some thermal excitation so that electrons will be available. So it means that we are giving some energy so that we can make it work. So that is not good. So we want some more electrons readily available again. So that's why we use a method called as doping, and this technique is called as you change the concentration of these carriers in the semiconductor. So with this we can have two types of extrinsic semiconductor. So extrinsic means doped or impure semiconductors. One is p-type. So obviously when we try to dope it with the trivalent impurities, the p-type materials are created. So what happens is you increase the conductivity by increasing the number of holes. Now how it happens? Silicon, it has got valency 4. Valency means outermost electron. So now as it is as we are adding element from trivalent, still it becomes 4 plus 3 7. So there is one absence, and that one, and we know that absence of bond, we will be treating it as presence of holes. So you can see here, if I'm doping aluminum, which is a metal, and 3 is the valency. So you can see when there is aluminum atom sitting in the array of silicon, this bond is absent over here, and that is what we call it as H plus, or holes. So holes are positively charged. So when we talk about the band gap diagram now, you can see this is the simple band diagram of the intrinsic semiconductor. And when we talk of aluminium, then the level of aluminium can be plotted here, which is very near to the valence band of silicon. And then you can see that what happens whenever they now see the point is in normal silicon, if this electron has to go here, it requires a very high energy, because this band gap is large. Okay, this gap is large. But when you go for this acceptor atom, why we call it as acceptor atom? Because now this length, this gap is very small, so electron can quickly go even with a small amount of thermal energy, and it creates a vacancy. So this gap, this level, what we have added because of the say aluminum doping, it is accepting the electrons, and that's why we call it as the acceptor level. So you can see the change in temperature. So T equal to 0 to T equal to 50. Of course, if I increase the temperature, more and more electrons are going to go and sit at these acceptor levels. So now what happens is, more holes are available. So here the conduction will be done by the holes, because at valence band you have got extra holes which are available. So now, do you remember we talked about the impurity levels, or what we call it as the impurities only. So there are some good impurities and bad impurities. So you can see aluminum is a good impurity for us. Why? Because it is sitting very near to this. So any material which has got the band gap which is very near to the valence band, so that can be used as this. So that is all about p-type. So acceptance of valence band electrons, that is what happens in p-type. Now, as I've said, resistivity, which is inverse of the conductivity, obviously that is going to change. If I dope intrinsic material with more of aluminum atoms, obviously more holes are available. It means the conductivity is going to increase. So both holes and electrons will have conductivity, and we can find out the resistivity as well. So you can see here, these are the typical doping numbers. So you can see, so these things you have to remember. Dopant density. So normally it is somewhere 10 raised to something. So and even that number would be somewhere here, 10 raised to 15 to 19. So these are the typical numbers. From 10 raised to 12 to 20, 10 raised to 21. That is what the practical limit of doping is. And you can see that resistivity obviously goes on decreasing whenever you are increasing the number of dopant atoms in the intrinsic ones. Similarly, we can talk about the N-type. So N-type obviously is a pentavalent, and you can see that now 4 plus 5, but we require 8, so we have got one extra, and that one extra is the electron. So that's why you can see one extra electron is present over here, and that's why we have more electrons. So in this case, again, we can draw this, but now only difference would be, now as we have electrons, and that can be shifted to the conduction band of the semiconductor. So you can see again the gap is very small, and that's why it is possible. So this particular dopant what we have added, that donates the electron to the conduction band, that donates the electron for the conduction. That's why we call it as a donor electron. Again, it's just the symmetrically opposite to what we have seen in acceptance. So now one point is actually what I was talking about, that we know two types of impurities, right? Good impurity and bad impurity. So if let us say we have got Al over here, just for sake of explaining my point. So let us say if there is Al, this is good. This is, let us say, phosphorus. This is also good. So what you later we will find out it. I mean, if this is something very near to the two bands, that material is good for us. But if something is sitting in between, that is not good, because first of all, jumping one electron from here to here will cost more energy, and obviously that will be a wastage. So if we can get the work done at this level, why we require this level? Because it will be a loss. So whatever in between this here in this region, if any material is, any element is sitting in there, that is not good for us, and that's why those impurities we are going to call it as bad impurities, and sometimes they are called as traps. Okay. And these causes so many problems. We will learn it in when we talk about the recombination. So anyway, so this is all about N type. So just to compare, so we can see in N type, these are the negative ones, because it's a group 5. We have got excess electrons, and as electron has got negative charge, we call it as negative. And you can remember from this, N means negative, negative means electrons. Okay. So in here, as we have got more number of electrons compared to the holes, that's why there is electrons are majority carriers and minority carriers are holes. Now, what are these majority and minority? Obviously, as usual, meaning we have got more number of carriers. So density, population density, you can understand. Majority carriers, majority are electrons. If we are talking about N type, then obviously you would expect that every available carrier should be electron. But then why there are holes? Now these holes are because of, there will be always some impurities here and there, and because of this thermal excitation we might have some holes which are created due to the thermal expansion, but the number of those holes would be much lesser as compared to the majority carriers, because majority carriers are controlled by us. So in the opposite way, boron and aluminum can be p-type, as it is positive, so that is holes, and obviously majority carriers will be holes over here. Here I will tell you one more difference. Of course, later we will discuss it in a extensive manner. The diode, rectifying diode, where the majority carrier take part, but in solar cell, as the device is opposite to that of the rectifying diode, well, almost, then the minority carrier are important for us. So for solar cell, you should understand that minority carrier are of vital importance. They are the VIPs over here. Okay, how exactly we will learn later. Now so we have got two carriers, right? Electrons as well as holes, and both can be present. So obviously now we have to talk about the equilibrium between them, how much this and how much that. Okay, so equilibrium carrier concentration is obviously the number of carriers which are available in conduction as well as valence, because we are talking about both the carriers. And when no external applied bias is applied, because obviously when you apply external bias, there will not be any equilibrium. Okay, so this is natural equilibrium that we are talking about. So now this equilibrium concentration, which is at a certain temperature, can obviously be increased by doping, as we have seen. So in that equilibrium case, what we can write is, for let us say if it is the majority carriers, then so now when I say majority carriers, it applies to both N as well as P type. Equilibrium carrier concentration has to be our basic concentration, natural concentration, that was intrinsic, plus whatever the number of free carriers which I am adding by the doping. So this will be the equilibrium concentration. So now we can find out the number of these with the use of law of mass action. So this says that at a particular equilibrium, the product of this majority and minority concentration has to be constant. Okay, because we know that both will be present at any point of time. So obviously at equilibrium, both will be present. So we can say that N0 P0 is Ni square. And this Ni obviously stands for intrinsic, and N0 stands for the equilibrium conditions. So these are the electron and hole equilibrium carrier concentrations for material. So N0 P0 will be equal to Ni square. Now when you use this, you can obviously find out the value of either N0 or P0. So let us say we are talking about N type. Then N-type means N0 will be majorly ND, so you can find out the value of the other one, P0. And in case of P-type, the carriers would be acceptor ones, so that's why you can find out the value of N0 over here. So ND and Na are obviously the concentration of donor and acceptor atom. That's why I'm writing this as D and A, because this will be dominated, this will be because of the doping what we are achieving. So from this expression, you can find out that if the minority, if you are increasing this doping level, you are increasing ND. So obviously P0 has to decrease. So these P0 and ND or P0 and N0 will be obviously opposite to each other. Why? Because we have to keep this Ni to be constant at any point of time. That Ni you cannot change. So let us solve one quick example. So please read this and solve it quickly. You don't require calculator. You can do this just orally. So simple one line answer. So please find out. Manish Kumar Nayak. Manish Kumar. Absent? Priyanka Kumari. Priyanka Kumari.
Yes, sir.
What's the answer? Mohammad Parvez.
Yes, sir.
What's the answer?
Thinking, sir.
Thinking. Soumya Ranjan Senapati. Soumya Ranjan Senapati. Any answer?
Sir, 10 raised to the power 8.
10 raised to 4. Yeah, anyway, let us check it. So this is the only equation we have, right? And what is given is the silicon sample is doped with the phosphorus atom. So doping is now 10 raised to 16. So Nd is, what do you call it as? N0 is given to you, that is Nd in this case. And then Ni, already I have told you that you can take this particular value, 1.5 into 10 raised to 10. So when you substitute this N0 and Ni, what P0 you will get is roughly 2 into 10 raised to 4. That's all. Okay. So here you can say that 10 raised to 10 into 2, that is 10 raised to 20 by 10 raised to 16, so that is 10 raised to 4, right? So this 1.5 square, that is 2.25, so you don't require calculator. Anyway, so who is this? Rohit Kumar Ekka? Rohit Kumar.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Present, sir.
Present में attendance नहीं ले रहा हूँ. Have you got this answer or not?
No, sir. I forgot the value for Ni.
Okay. Pandrinki Rakesh. Are you online? कहाँ घूम रहे हो? गोलगप्पा खा रहे हो? हेलो राकेश. अरे घूम रहे हो कि घर पे ही हो? Anyway, so I suppose you got the number. So now the point here is that check the values. So N0 is 10 raised to 16, whereas P0 is just 2 into 10 raised to 4. So forget these two because that is not negligible now. So 10 raised to 16 versus 10 raised to 4. So that's why you can see minority carriers are too small. However, later we will see that even though these are very small, this is what VIP for us, okay, for solar cell operations. Anyway. So now, so we have talked about carriers. We have talked about that how conduction will take place. Now, whenever the conduction starts, I mean, so we require carriers, right? So doping is what you say. What you say, adjustment or provision so that carriers will be made, but still you require some energy to give, right? Otherwise there is no temperature hike, otherwise the carriers will not cross from valence to whatever band or whatever to whatever band, because doping, with this doping we have got multiple bands. So point is that we have to generate, and that's why we require in solar cell we require photons because they carry the energy. So these carriers needs to be generated first of all. So whenever they are generated, obviously they are going to move here and there, okay? And then as I've said, at a time both the carriers are present, electrons as well as hole in the same material, right? So obviously these two carriers are opposite in nature, one is positive and one is negative. So obviously if they come together, they will annihilate or they will recombine themselves. So we have to understand how this generation is done, generation happens, and how recombination happens in the material. So obviously for solar cell, we require to absorb the light. Now this is in continuation with our direct band gap and indirect band gap, whatever I was talking about. So you can relate to that. So we require absorption of light over here. So let us say a photon is coming to a solar cell surface. So if this photon comes, there are three possibilities over here. It can reflect, or it can transmit through, let us say this is the material we have, or it can get absorbed in between somewhere in that. Okay, so this is what the basic optical response of the photo of the material when a photon is incident on that. So these three, which will be dominant, which process will be dominant, depend upon what exactly we are doing and what is the material that we are using. Okay, so obviously for photovoltaics, we want that every what is a bit of energy has to be absorbed in the solar cell so that it will give away the electricity that what we want. So everything should get absorbed. It means this process is bad and this process is bad. Reflection and transmission should be are considered as a loss mechanisms. Okay, so this word you will remember. So these are the loss mechanisms, and definitely we don't want the reflection and we don't want the transmission over here. So how, again, so understand, this is the physics I have told, that we have to minimize reflection, we have to minimize the transmission. Now how to achieve it, again it becomes the engineering problem. Okay, so that is how science and engineering are coming together. So obviously when this photon is getting absorbed here, there is a possibility still, ideally it has to create electricity, right? It has to create the current. However, there is a high probability that this photon which is absorbed goes through several or so kicks off several processes, and ultimately it causes some conduction to happen. Okay, anyway, so the first process is the generation, and for that we require absorption. So forget about reflection and transmission as of now. We are interested in the photon one which is getting absorbed. So if photon is absolutely carrying energy less than the band gap, obviously it cannot strike the electron from the valence band so that it will reach the electron. No, this is not possible. It will rise somewhere over here. So, and we know that no electron can sit in between. Again, don't consider the trap levels and impurity. Forget about that. Okay, so it cannot sit between this conduction and valence band. So this is not possible. This is not possible. So as I've said, this photon sees the material as a transparent. because it is not getting absorbed. So that's why it is a weak photon. And this should be this is a weak photon, and then it passes through. The other condition is when photon energy is very high. So there is absolutely high probability that it will get absorbed. So we call it as strongly absorbed. But it doesn't matter what is the energy. It is greater than the band gap. So let us say 1.4 electron volt, and we have got silicon. So this extra 0.3, what it is going to happen? So that 0.3 is not going to do anything, because one photon is at max create one EHP, electron hole pair. So this extra 0.3 is wastage, and that makes it thermalization loss. So even though we have got a good photon, this extra energy is useless for you. Okay, so this is good. It is generating some electron EHPs. However, it is wasting the energy as well. The ideal condition would be EPH equal to the photon energy equal to the band gap energy. So that is enough energy to create one EHP. But where is the problem? If you remember the solar spectrum, this is somewhat it looks like. And if we talk about silicon, I mean this condition, this is only one condition, and where we have got not even 1% of the photons. So these are the photons which we are interested in, and these are not. Okay, so anyway, so this is the one major problem that we will be facing when we try to choose the material for solar. So if it is 1.4, that is gallium arsenide, it would be here. So there would be more photons which would be transparent to this material. Silicon, lesser transparent material, but then thermalization losses will be more. So that is what the dilemma is, how to choose it. That's why I'm telling you very frequently that the solar cell is all about the optimization. So anyway, coming back to absorption. So obviously, let us say there is some photon incident. It is greater than the band gap. So it is creating one EHP. So it is going to create both majority as well as minority carriers. Now what happens is, in PV applications, the number of light generated carriers, which is created because of these photons, they will be obviously very less as compared to the majority carriers which are already present, that we have made possible with the help of doping. So if you think of the majority carrier concentration, it is not going to affect much. Okay, but what happens is, as this light generated carrier is going to create the minority as well, the minority carrier concentration, the change in minority carrier concentration rather, would be much higher. So I'll try to give you with some numbers. Okay, again hypothetical. Let us say we have got 100 majority and 2 minority carriers, okay, which is present in the solar cell material that we have. Now, let us say I am putting 2 photons on it, or let us say 1 photon on it, okay. So that 1 photon is going to create both electron as well as photon hole, one each. So what will happen to this? It will become +1, and this will become also +1. Now, if you calculate the percentage, this is just 1%, whereas this becomes almost 50%, right? So you can see huge change is occurring in the minority carriers compared to the majority carriers. Now, when you talk about the rectifier diode, exactly opposite will happen, because there, if you remember, the P side is connected to positive side. So you are introducing more more holes over there. So it means you are increasing the majority carriers itself by a significant amount. Okay, so rectifying diode works on the majority concentration, the solar cell works on the minority carrier concentration. So that's why we are not really interested in the majority carrier. Rather, the whole current which is flowing in the solar cell will be now approximated by the number of minority carriers which are generated in an illuminated cell. Illuminated means where we are casting photons on the material. Okay, so again, this is the reason why minority carriers are vital and important for us. So obviously, later we will talk about our preferences, that which carrier we should protect, whether it is a majority or minority. as the natural law suggests, we should protect VIPs, right? We know VIP culture more than any other country. So for us, minority carrier is the VIP over here. So we have to protect minority carriers. So later, whenever we talk about any parameter where we have to choose or where we have to modify the material with respect to these minorities, we should really protect them. Okay, fine. Now absorption we are talking about. So as I've said, every material is different when it comes to absorption, and the property is given by something called as absorption coefficient alpha. So this absorption coefficient determines how far that material is required so that a photon of a particular length can get absorbed. Okay. And here you will understand what I was talking about, that gallium arsenide requires thinner material compared to the silicon material. Okay. So it says that suppose some photon is coming, so every photon will have some wavelength. So if this is coming to the surface, how far it should go so that it gets absorbed and it creates a electron hole pair. So it can be absorbed very near to the surface, or it can absorb somewhere in the middle, or if it doesn't absorb, what does it means? The absorption length required is higher. So whatever from this to this, okay, this I'm going to call it as the absorption length. How far in the material it is going to get absorbed. So if the alpha is low, then light is poorly absorbed, and if alpha is high, obviously it will be highly absorbed. So in case of low absorption coefficient, the material will be what you call it as transparent. So glass definitely has a low absorption coefficient. Okay. So now it depends obviously on the wavelength, as I've talked about. So this alpha can be given as 4 pi k by lambda. This k is extinction coefficient, and for a particular material this value will be given to you. Okay, so normally this lambda wavelength is in nanometers, so you can have proper multiplication so that you have the units such that alpha, I mean, the unit of alpha has to be centimeter inverse, so that you have to multiply and do the adjustment. So this is what I'm talking about. So you can compare various materials which are used for solar cells over here. So you can see one easy observation. Okay, check germanium and silicon. These are indirect band gap. The curve is flatter in the sense not sharp. Okay, you can compare with this gallium arsenide or the CDT, or this one is indium phosphide. Okay, these three curves I am talking about. So you can see these are absolutely sharp at somewhere around below 800, 900 to 1000, whereas the what you call it as for silicon and germanium, quite high. So what does it mean? So for let us say for we'll talk about here, because after 1000 the curves are not present for gallium arsenide. So let us say photon is coming of say 700 nanometer wavelength. Okay, so now you can see silicon, it is here, and gallium arsenide, it is here. So obviously for a particular wavelength, the silicon is having low absorption coefficient. It means the gallium arsenide, it is higher probable that it will get absorbed. However, the problem is you can see there is a cutoff somewhere around 900 to 1000 nanometers. So what happens if there is a photon with 1100 wavelength? It is transparent for the gallium arsenide, but it may get absorbed somewhere. There is a little probability, but there is a probability that it will get absorbed in silicon. Okay, so here you can also understand that when we talked about the multi-junction cell, we had these three cells. So with somewhat around 1.7 was the top cell, 1.4 was the bottom cell, and somewhere around 1.1 electron hole was the bottom cell. So you can see here, if this is silicon or germanium, whatever, you can capture red photons over here. Fine, because they have already traveled a long distance and they can get absorbed over here. So anyway, this direct band gap shows a sharp edge in their absorption coefficient, and if you can measure this absorption coefficient, you can detect the material as well, and this can be done by the UV visible spectroscopy. You can plot these curves, and then you can find out the band gap of the material. Okay, so if you let us say you are going for some quantum dots of some material, so you have to find out the band gap. So this method can be utilized. The other thing you should notice that alpha is not constant. Okay, alpha is variable. So although it is for a material it will be constant, but at a particular wavelength. So that's why I have given you the example of this somewhere 700 nanometer and versus 1100 nanometer example. Now, as I've said, the absorption coefficient determines the length. Now, obviously, this length when I'm talking about, it is the solar cell length as well. So absorption length controls the solar cell thickness, right? And who controls the solar cell thickness? The cost of the material. Because if, let us say, okay, let me define. Absorption length is 1 by alpha. So if the absorption coefficient is lower, say in silicon, what we require? The length has to be larger. So you can understand gallium arsenide has got lesser thickness, whereas silicon has got larger thickness. So larger thickness for the same absorption, it means the cost would be more over here. So the point is this is determined by, again, your typical law where the light intensity drops 36%. That is what the factor you are taking into account. So the point here is, let us say if there is a high energy light, that is short wavelength or blue photon, which will have high energy, the absorption coefficient would be much higher. So normally blue photons are absorbed very quickly. Okay. Now, this point you should remember very well, because again, let us say this is the solar cell. So if a blue photon is coming, it is possible that it will get absorbed. Let us say this is infinite length. Okay, don't worry about the length. So blue photon is going to absorb very near to the surface. Green might be here and red might be here. So you can see that as blue photon. Now blue photon is VIP for us again. Okay, minority carrier is VIP for us, blue photon is also VIP for us. So treatment for blue should be like luxurious. So whenever it enters, it gets absorbed. So now you can understand that this is the surface of the solar cell. So our surface should be too good that there should not be any defect present over there, such that that defect will take away that energy of the photon, and it will not create any electron hole pairs. Okay. Anyway, so red will have lower energy. It will take longer wavelength. So obviously it is not going to absorb. So it requires a longer it requires a thick material. Okay, so obviously earlier you can see that the silicon cells were 250 microns or 500 microns or something like that wafer thickness, but later people realized that this extra length is unnecessary, because this is required to absorb red photons, and red photons carry very less energy. So that is where the compromise started, that yes, fine, let go those red photons which has got very little energy, but at that time we can save some material. Okay, so whatever efficiency increase it would happen if I am collecting those red photons, that efficiency was lesser compared to the cost, concern cost it would incur, so that I need some extra material. So this is how the cost cutting was done in the previous one. I think you remember the graph where I showed that the thickness dropped from 400 microns to about 200, 150 microns. Rather, nowadays, even my student is also working on working where we are going for 25 micron or 10 micron substrate, which would be used for making solar cells using some layer transfer process. Okay, so now, of course, there are various ways. I have told you one of the ways this layer transfer process, where we can make the solar cell somewhere on what you call 10 to 25 micron thickness. Okay, so this is how the absorption depth affects the solar cell design and thickness of the semiconductor material, the cost, the efficiency, everything. Okay, so I think what's the time? It is already 6:10, so I'll stop here, and we will resume this discussion maybe in the next class. I will what to say. I will give you the PPTs of whatever the parts. So please go through the part what we have discussed, because let me tell you, as the course progresses, all these things will come together. Okay, and as I've said, we have to think of multiple parameters simultaneously. You should remember the effect of each and every parameter. And the worst part is, if one parameter is good, other would be bad, and so on and so forth. So it's really a chaos that will happen after some time, and we will have so many terms and so many parameters. So just revise what I have told, and again apply your common sense. That would be more than enough. Okay. So we will stop here. By the way, somebody was asking about the segregation coefficient. I got one very interesting web page. I have shared that PDF in your document, so please go through it. If anybody has gone through some material related course earlier in your open elective or something, that document would be more interested to him. It includes phase diagram and some more derivations and formulas as well. Okay, so thank you very much. Good night.